All right, so let's start by talking about schedule a little bit. Tuesday is today. Thursday, no class. I'm at a workshop. So Tuesday, so I guess it depends when I make the project due. So we're kind of in workshop mode right now. And anyone do any work on it? Well, that's about how much work I did on it. So, I mean, do you have any questions for me at this point? I guess the only thing there might be questions on is either the layout of the project or on the technology and message queues. I think everything you'd need for implementing message queues is provided in those two sample programs. It's just a matter of kind of pulling it apart and understanding it. And I think signals are pretty straightforward. You just register for them and have a function that handles it. Nothing? Anything you want me to talk about? Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure I get how you actually send the signal. I understand how you receive it.
How do you send? So sending is really isn't much different than writing to a file descriptor. So message queues have their own peculiar little type for file descriptors. So that's here. You do an MQ open. That's a C-style string for the name of it, which of course would be consistent with whatever you called it on the side where you created and opened it for reading. You're only interested in writing to it, and you don't want it to be a blocking call. So once you open it, it is literally just fill up a string with text, and there's the file descriptor, there's the character pointer to the text, and then you just have to tell how many characters there are in the message. And let's look at the oh, I'm not in. Let me go somewhere else. And so the last one's a priority, and we're not worrying about any sort of priority, so you just throw 0 in there.
Are we using the message queue as well for the update map stuff?
No, so there are two separate signals you need to deal with, and also keep in mind that the mechanism is slightly different. So looking at the update map, you're going to use the traditional, you create a handling function, and then you go ahead and you register that function as a message handler for SIG user 1, I guess. Right? And then that function is just going to redraw the map. And that's good. All you write the little one-liner function, you fill up the structure and register the signal, and then you're done. Everything works great. The message queues, on the other hand, you don't register the signal in the same sense that you registered it for the map redraw. Message queues have a feature where the message queue mechanism itself will send you a signal if a message ends up on the queue. So for dealing with that, there's a separate process which is in the read queue function. I'm sorry, let me take a step back. What's different between the two is in the first case where you need to redraw the map, what you're doing is you're writing code to loop through that array of PIDs and send a signal to each one of those PIDs, a kill, SIG user 1, right? And that's going to trigger their redraw map.
You send them a kill? That's the signal we're using? Kill is just the
Kill's a poorly named system call for send a signal to another process. One of the parameters of the kill function is the signal that you want to send. So let me requalify it. So you register for the signal, and then you have to actively send out signals to all the other processes saying, hey, I just moved, please redraw yourself, right? And then every process is registered for the SIG user 1, so as soon as it hits that SIG user 1, it's going to run the function you wrote to redraw the map. The message queues, you have to register for the signal, but you do not, when you send a message to someone, there's no need to then send a signal to that person. There's no need to make a call to the kill system call. And the reason is that the message queue mechanism itself will signal the process when a message is received. So that's the difference there. The other quirky thing about that registration for the message queue is what you do is the message queue exists out there in the world. Some process on the machine says, hey, send me a signal when a message appears on this queue. And the message queue is, okay, that's fine. When a message comes in, it goes ahead and sends a signal to that process. Then the registration is removed. It's a one-time only thing. So what that means is the very first thing you should do in your signal handler for message queues is re-register. So the next time a message comes in, you'll be notified by the message queue. And that's what this MQ notify function is. So you have to set it up for, you've created the message queue, you've opened it up, and now you do this, which is just fill out a structure. And the structure has a field to say the type of notification I want is a signal, this is the signal I want to receive, and then the actual registration. And this is the one-off thing. The moment a message comes in now, you're going to be hit with a SIG user 2. So the very first thing your handler should do for SIG user 2 is the exact same thing. Create that structure, fill it up, say you want to receive a signal, you want to receive SIG user 2, and go ahead and make the call to MQ notify. Now you can go ahead and handle the message. So I create a character array, I know how many characters I'm expecting, because that's how many are being sent. And the key thing here is, and you actually use these numbers, is don't try to deal with variable length messages. Just send 120 characters and receive 120 characters. And then just pad everything that is less than 120 characters with null bytes. Okay, and then it'll work perfectly. And that's what this is doing. This memset is setting every byte of these 121 bytes to the null byte, just zeroing it all out. And now this will receive. Actually, this is probably not necessary on this side. Probably the only thing I need to do is set the very last byte to null, just in case. You go ahead and read in the signal, or read in the message, and then you go ahead and call that map function to, I don't remember, well, what's that map function called? Post notice. So the message you receive from the queue, you then call post notice. That'll display it up for the user.
So the message queue is just a 120 character array. What if two messages get queued up?
Then if we look at the code on read queue here, I've got this in a while loop. So it'll keep reading over and over again until there's no longer a message. So right, your post notice is going to be inside this loop. And then after you do some courtesy error checking, when you bail out of the loop, again, I have it commented here, there's no more messages. So if it's anything other than that, then something wrong's happened.
But if it's just a 120 character, 120 character array, where does that second message sit and wait? Is it just?
Oh no, the 120 is the size of the message, not the size of the queue.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, I don't know what the upper limit of the queue is, but it's very reasonable. Anything else?
How would MQ send know to use sig user 2? If you're setting it up just to, because that's just setting up, say, I want to receive sig user 2, that's going to be the signal
Right here?
to trigger the read, right? Yeah, so this is in read message. How would when you do MQ send?
So when you do MQ,
Or did you do something similar in MQ send?
no, I didn't do anything like that in MQ send. Here, this is, right, here's the beginning of my main function. So the first thing I do is, so that's for handling the interrupt. That's gratuitous. Let's not look at that. All right. So the first thing I do in main is I do all the typical signal stuff, which is to register a function.
Okay.
For sig user 2. And then the separate bit is to talk to the message queue, or whatever you want to call it, framework, and tell that framework, hey, if this particular queue, identified by this file descriptor, receives a message, then do whatever this structure says to do. And what the structure says to do is to send a signal, and that signal should be sig user 2. And what's implicit, if you were to crack open the source code to MQ notify, you would see that they would do a get PID, and it would find out what the process ID of this process is, so it knows where to send the signal. right? Because this is the message queue framework is a system level resource. So then a message comes in, it goes ahead and sends a SIG user 2. That's going to do whatever we told it to do when it got SIG user 2, which was to call the action to take function. If I go investigate that where am I? The read message function right here. And the read message function is once again going to register, so please send me a signal when another one comes in. And then we go ahead and, after we've re-registered, we go ahead and process the messages on the queue.
It's kind of a step back, but one of the first things you said to touch on this was changing the player. We had this unsigned char players, and you said to make it an array, right?
Unsigned char, so that's the structure. The unsigned char players should be removed entirely, and it should be replaced with an array of 5 PID types.
So the PID types would be just like the bits, right? Like
The PID types are the process IDs of the various game processes. So your project 1 would figure out which player it is by examining the bits in that unsigned character, right? And it would find the first 0 bit and it'd go, okay, I'm G_PLR3. And it would turn that bit on, and then the game would play. And then when the person quits, it would go to that same byte and it would turn off that bit. For this one, you remove that altogether and you have the array of 5 PIDs, and what you do instead is you get your own process ID and you look for the first, in that array of 5, you look for the first position that has 0. Now we're not talking bits now, we're talking about elements in an array, right? The first element, that 0, once we find 0, we put our own process ID in there, and then we know that we're GPL_3 because it was the 4th item in the array. And then likewise, when you leave the game, you go into that array and set your element to 0.
you can't have both simultaneously.
If you have both experience has shown that if you have both simultaneously, you'll end up with half your code thinking one, half your code thinking the other, and you'll have hours worth of debugging. The very first thing, before you do anything else in this project, just simply remove that from the structure, put in the array of 5 PID types, and then go through your code and make your code work that way. Yeah.
Why didn't we do it that way from the start?
A couple reasons. One is that it's an excuse for me to foist bit manipulation on you, more bit manipulation. The second reason is it more authentically captures real applications development, which is you have perfectly fine code that now needs to be reworked based on new updates. You definitely, obviously it depends on the particular job, but certainly in my career you spend a whole hell of a lot of time doing revisions of code versus new novel development. And it's painful and scary when you have to make this update and it's going to require, it's frustrating because the only way this is going to work when you make the change is after you get rid of 300 lines of code and throw in 800 lines of code spread across 10,000 lines of code, and none of it's going to work till you get the whole change put in place. So it's, yeah, you know, it's fun. That's why we do it, right? All right. What I will do is I will end the recording here, and then we can just hang out. And if you have questions, I'll just field them as they come.
When did you say this was due?
So there's no class on Thursday. Tuesday will be like today,
Next Tuesday.
a week from today.
Okay.
My hope certainly is that sometime between now and then, probably over the weekend, you've spent serious time so that you have serious questions. And then it'll probably, I'm thinking it'll probably be due like Wednesday night, and then we move on to the next project on Thursday. But I'll go ahead and leave it a little bit sloppy. We'll see where we're at on Tuesday. If no one's done any work on it at all on Tuesday, then I love making it due Wednesday night.
Are you also at the workshop tomorrow? So no office hours?
Yeah, I fly out tonight.
Okay.
CSU Fullerton.
Ooh.
Get me a CSU Fullerton baseball hat that I'll start wearing.